Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to the English Globe, the place where we explore global topics in clear and simple English. And today we are beginning a deep educational journey into a subject that has become one of the most widely discussed issues in international affairs because Taiwan's situation is influencing politics, trade, economics, and diplomacy across Asia and the entire world, making it essential for English learners who want a better understanding of world news.
Before we begin with the main discussion, we kindly ask you, our dear listeners, to like this video if you enjoy long, slow, and educational English content, because your support helps our channel grow and allows us to produce more meaningful lessons that bring together language practice and real-world knowledge that can help you improve your listening, vocabulary, and global awareness at the same time.
We also invite you to subscribe to the English Globe, because subscribing makes it easier for you to find our new lessons every day, and it helps you stay connected to high-quality English learning materials, especially podcasts like this one where we speak slowly, clearly, and in simple sentences to guide you through difficult topics in a relaxed and friendly way.
We would love to know where you are listening from, so please write a comment telling us the name of your country or city, because our community is made up of learners from many different places, and sharing your location helps us understand our audience better and inspires us to create more lessons that match your interests, your backgrounds, and the topics you want to explore in your English learning journey.
You can also share your opinion about today's topic, because discussions like these are not just about information, but also about building confidence in expressing ideas in English. And when you comment, you practice real communication, improve your writing skills, and become a more active part of our global classroom, which is something we deeply appreciate.
Now, today's topic is why Taiwan is the most explosive issue in Asian geopolitics. And we selected this subject not because we want to promote any political view, but because it gives English learners a chance to understand a major issue in world news, while practicing useful vocabulary related to geography, economics, technology, and international relations, all explained in a calm, balanced, and respectful way that follows educational standards.
This topic is important for English learners because Taiwan is often mentioned in international newspapers, global magazines, political debates, and high-level diplomatic meetings, and when students hear it discussed in English, the meaning can sometimes be confusing. So in this podcast, we will break everything down into simple ideas, clear explanations, and easy-to-follow examples, without any complicated political language that might create confusion.
Another reason this topic matters is that Taiwan sits in a region that connects major countries like China, Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, meaning its location influences shipping routes, trade flows, economic development, and even global technology production, which makes it a perfect subject for learners who want to strengthen vocabulary for news, economics, geography, and business English.
Even though Taiwan's situation is complex, we will explain it slowly and step by step, because our goal is not to choose sides or give political arguments, but to offer an educational overview that helps listeners understand why governments, scholars, and news channels pay so much attention to this issue, and how it influences the stability of Asia and the economic security of the entire world.
We will guide you through the background, the geography, the economic importance, and the different perspectives that shape today's discussions. And we will do all of this using simple English so that even beginner or intermediate learners can follow along comfortably, without feeling overwhelmed by difficult vocabulary or confusing political terms that are often used in expert discussions.
So as we begin this first section, we invite you once again to like the video, subscribe to the English Globe, and share your location and thoughts in the comments section, because your engagement supports our educational mission and allows us to continue producing high-quality English learning content that connects real-world topics with simple explanations designed to help you grow step by step. To understand why Taiwan is often described as one of the most important locations in Asia, we first need to look carefully at its geography, because geography is not only about maps and places, but also about how countries interact, how trade travels from one region to another, and how the physical position of an island can influence the decisions of many nations that depend on safe routes for ships, stable markets for goods, and reliable partners for economic connections that support millions of people around the world.
Taiwan is a long and narrow island that lies off the southeastern coast of China, and it stretches along the western edge of the Pacific Ocean, forming a natural gateway between East Asia and the wider Pacific region, which means that its location allows ships, airplanes, and communication networks to move smoothly across some of the busiest transportation corridors in the world, connecting major economies such as Japan, South Korea, China, the Philippines, and the countries of Southeast Asia in a continuous flow of movement and exchange.
To the north of Taiwan, you will find Japan's Ryukyu Islands, which form a long chain connecting Taiwan to the Japanese island of Kyushu, and this chain creates a strategic line that marks an important border between the East China Sea and the Philippine Sea, a line that is constantly crossed by cargo ships carrying goods, raw materials, electronic components, and energy supplies that keep factories running and businesses functioning across the Asia-Pacific region.
To the south of Taiwan lies the Philippines, another country made up of many islands, and together Taiwan and the Philippines form a pathway known as the Bashi Channel, which may look like a small stretch of water on a map. But in reality, it is one of the most essential maritime routes for ships that travel between the Pacific Ocean and the South China Sea, carrying everything from food and fuel to technology products and industrial machinery that nations depend on for daily life and economic survival.
When we look west from Taiwan, we see the southeastern coastline of China, and although the Taiwan Strait that separates the two sides seems narrow on a map, it is one of the busiest waterways in Asia, with countless commercial vessels passing through every week, transporting goods between major ports such as Shanghai, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Kaohsiung, making the region an important link in global trade networks that support economic growth across Asia and beyond.
The position of Taiwan also matters because it sits at the center of what many experts call the first island chain, a long arc of islands that stretches from Japan down to the Philippines. And this chain forms a natural barrier that shapes how countries move ships, aircraft, and commercial resources across the region, making Taiwan a key marker that influences patterns of navigation, transportation, and cooperation among nations that rely on these routes for trade and communication.
Another reason Taiwan's geography is so important is that the surrounding seas are home to enormous volumes of maritime traffic. Because Asia has become one of the busiest and most productive economic regions in the world, and for companies to move goods efficiently, they depend on stable sea lanes, predictable shipping schedules, and safe passage through narrow channels where even small changes can affect the speed of global trade that millions of people rely on every single day.
When ships travel between East Asia and regions such as Europe, Africa, the Middle East, or North America, many of them pass near Taiwan or through nearby waters, and this constant flow of activity turns the island into a kind of crossroads for global commerce, meaning that any disruption to shipping near Taiwan could slow down the movement of goods like electronics, clothing, machinery, medical supplies, and automotive parts that are essential for businesses and consumers throughout the world.
Beyond trade routes, Taiwan's geography also has historical importance, because for centuries the island has been seen as a valuable location for fishing, farming, travel, and international interaction, and different island communities, merchants, and foreign explorers have passed near or through Taiwan while moving between major regions such as China, Japan, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific Islands, showing that the island's role as a connecting point has existed long before modern politics or modern technology.
Today, Taiwan's position continues to shape how countries think about economic cooperation and regional stability, because its central location means that it plays a role in shipping, technology supply lines, energy transportation, and commercial aviation routes, making it more than simply a place on the map, but rather a hub that many industries depend on, whether they are producing smartphones, building cars, operating shipping companies, or supporting global logistics networks that serve millions of customers.
For English learners, understanding Taiwan's strategic position helps build vocabulary related to geography, trade, navigation, and global connections, because terms such as shipping lane, maritime route, island chain, strait, and transport corridor are commonly used in international news, economic reports, and educational documentaries, and by learning them in a clear, simple, and calm discussion like this one, students can develop stronger listening skills and a better understanding of world events. To understand why Taiwan is considered one of the most influential places in the modern global economy, we need to look closely at the industries that shape its success, especially the technology sector, because Taiwan plays a central role in producing some of the world's most advanced electronic components. And without these components, many devices that we use every day, such as smartphones, computers, medical machines, and even modern cars, would not be able to function properly or be manufactured at the same speed or quality that global consumers expect.
One of the most important parts of Taiwan's economy is its semiconductor industry, and the word semiconductor might sound difficult. But in simple English, it means the tiny electronic chips that act like the brain of almost every modern device, because these chips control information, guide signals, support memory, and manage power inside phones, laptops, vehicles, televisions, and thousands of other machines that people use for work, communication, education, transportation, and entertainment.
Taiwan is home to some of the world's most advanced semiconductor companies, and the most well-known among them is TSMC, which stands for Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. And this company is recognized globally for producing extremely small and powerful chips that can handle huge amounts of processing tasks, making them essential for artificial intelligence systems, high-speed computing, advanced medical tools, scientific research equipment, and many technological innovations that continue to shape the way modern societies operate.
Many international businesses depend on TSMC and other Taiwanese chip makers because producing semiconductors requires very special machines, extremely clean environments, highly trained engineers, and complex processes that only a few places in the world can manage at the same level of precision. And this is why countries, companies, and consumers rely so heavily on Taiwan to supply the parts that make modern technology possible, connecting everything from personal devices to global communication networks.
When we talk about technology, we often think only of the phone in our hand or the computer on our desk, but the reality is that Taiwan's semiconductor industry affects nearly every part of the global economy. Because when your car uses sensors to park smoothly, when your bank uses secure digital systems to protect your money, when your hospital uses advanced machines to scan your body, or when your school uses online learning tools, all of these systems depend on chips that may have been designed or manufactured in Taiwan.
This is why Taiwan's economy is so important to global supply chains, which is a term that means all the steps that materials, parts, products, and services travel through before they reach the customer. And if even one part of this chain slows down or becomes limited, it can disrupt factories, delay shipments, increase prices, or create shortages for businesses in countries all around the world, showing how interconnected economies have become in the modern era of technology and international trade.
For example, during times when chip production slowed down, companies that build cars in Europe, America, and Asia struggled to complete vehicles, because even though a car might seem like a large mechanical product, it actually requires hundreds of small chips to manage everything from navigation and braking to safety sensors and entertainment systems, which means a delay in Taiwan's semiconductor production can cause delays in car manufacturing thousands of miles away.
The same thing happens with smartphones and computers, because many major technology brands design products in one country, assemble them in another country, and rely on Taiwanese semiconductors to complete the internal systems. And this kind of international cooperation is the reason global supply chains are so dependent on stable and consistent production conditions in Taiwan, where companies have spent decades improving their technology, their training programs, and their advanced methods of manufacturing.
Another important part of Taiwan's economy is its ability to innovate, which means creating new ideas, improving existing technology, and developing better methods of production. And the island has built a strong reputation for innovation because its universities, research centers, and private companies work together to train engineers, experiment with new materials, and invest in scientific research that helps Taiwan remain ahead of many other countries in the semiconductor and electronics industries.
Taiwan also exports a wide range of electronic parts that support global businesses, including circuit boards, computer components, networking equipment, and specialized manufacturing tools that help factories in other countries continue operating efficiently. And because Taiwan exports so many technology products, it has developed strong trade relationships with many nations, making its economy closely connected to regions across Asia, Europe, North America, and other parts of the world that depend on reliable technology supplies.
Another reason Taiwan's economic role is so important is that technology is not just a part of everyday life. It is now the foundation of communication, transportation, education, security, and health systems worldwide. And since Taiwan produces many of the components that allow these systems to work, any changes in its technology industry can affect businesses, governments, and individuals around the world, showing how deeply Taiwan is linked to global progress and economic stability.
For English learners, understanding Taiwan's technological importance helps build vocabulary connected to business English, economic English, and technology English, because terms such as semiconductors, supply chains, innovation, global production, advanced manufacturing, and electronic components are common in news reports, international discussions, and professional settings. And learning these words through clear and simple explanations can help you become more confident in listening and speaking about global topics.
To understand why Taiwan is often discussed in international news today, we need to explore its historical background in a simple and educational way, because history helps us see how different cultures, communities, and governments shaped the island over time, and this understanding allows English learners to follow global conversations without confusion or misunderstanding, especially when the topic involves long timelines, multiple groups, and events that developed over many centuries rather than in just a few moments.
Taiwan's history begins with its indigenous peoples, who lived on the island for thousands of years before any major foreign power arrived, and these indigenous groups developed their own languages, traditions, farming systems, and social structures, which formed the earliest cultural foundation of Taiwan, proving that the island has always been home to diverse communities that shaped its identity long before modern politics or modern borders existed.
In the 1600s, Taiwan began to attract more attention from different regional powers because its location made it a convenient stopping point for ships traveling through East Asia. And during this period, European groups such as the Dutch and the Spanish established short-lived settlements on parts of the island, mainly because they were interested in trade, agriculture, and maritime routes, but their presence did not last long, because local forces and regional powers eventually replaced them.
During the same century, various groups from mainland China began migrating to Taiwan, bringing their languages, farming techniques, cultural traditions, and trade skills. And over time, these communities established towns, ports, and agricultural villages, gradually shaping much of the island's cultural landscape, especially along the western plains, where farming and trading opportunities were more accessible and where many settlers found long-term stability.
Later, Taiwan became linked more directly to Chinese dynastic administration, and for many years, the island was connected to regional governance structures that influenced its development, population growth, and cultural exchange, and this connection played an important role in shaping Taiwan's demographic history because waves of settlers, merchants, and families continued to move to the island, creating a mix of cultures that formed the foundation of modern Taiwanese society.
In the late 1800s, global powers were expanding across Asia, and Taiwan's strategic location in the Pacific made it a place of interest for larger nations, which eventually led to a period when the island came under the control of Japan after a war between Japan and China. And during this time, Japan invested in infrastructure, roads, transportation networks, and administrative systems that changed many aspects of life on the island, developments that still influence certain parts of Taiwan's modern landscape.
This period lasted until the end of World War II, when Japan's control of Taiwan came to an end, and the island's administration changed again as post-war arrangements reshaped political boundaries across Asia, creating new governments, new responsibilities, and new regional relationships, which would later play a major role in shaping the political structure of East Asia and the way different governments interacted with each other in the decades that followed.
In the years after World War II, the political situation in Asia changed rapidly due to major developments in China, and these changes created a new reality in which Taiwan developed separately from mainland China, forming its own government, institutions, educational systems, and economic policies, while mainland China established a different system on its side, and from that point forward, the two sides followed different political paths that shaped their unique identities and systems of governance.
Because of this division, the second half of the 20th century saw Taiwan and mainland China forming different relationships with the international community, and various countries developed their own diplomatic policies regarding how they engaged with each side, which created a complex network of regional relationships that continues to influence discussions about diplomacy, trade, travel, and communication across Asia today, without determining or promoting any political opinions.
During these decades, Taiwan focused heavily on economic development, education, and industrial growth, and this effort transformed the island from an agricultural society into a global technological powerhouse, while mainland China underwent its own stages of development and reform, creating two separate but interconnected stories of growth that shaped regional economics, created new types of cooperation, and contributed to Asia's rising importance in the global economy.
It is also important to understand that throughout modern history, many international organizations and governments have described Taiwan's situation using carefully chosen diplomatic language that avoids taking positions on sovereignty, because these organizations focus mainly on maintaining peace, supporting economic stability, and encouraging dialogue to reduce regional tensions. And this approach helps maintain an environment where trade, communication, and cooperation can continue without unnecessary disruptions.
For English learners, this historical background is helpful because it explains why Taiwan is frequently mentioned in global discussions today, not because of any political argument, but because history created a situation in which several cultures, governments, and historical events became connected over time. And these connections continue to influence how countries interact with Taiwan, how trade flows across the region, and how international communities approach regional stability in Asia.
By understanding this long and neutral timeline, from indigenous cultures to early settlers, from European contact to Japanese rule, and from post-war changes to modern developments, learners gain a clearer picture of how Taiwan's identity was shaped, how it fits into broader Asian history, and why its relationships with neighboring countries are often discussed in diplomatic and economic conversations around the world, helping listeners follow the news more confidently without needing advanced political knowledge. To understand today's discussions about Taiwan, it is important to explore China's perspective in a calm, balanced, and academic way, because learning about how different governments see historical events can help English learners follow international news without confusion, and it allows them to build listening skills while studying one of the world's most frequently mentioned diplomatic issues. When we talk about China's point of view, we are not supporting or criticizing anything. We are simply explaining how China describes its relationship with Taiwan based on history, cultural connections, and long-standing government positions that have developed over many decades.
China's perspective begins with its view of history because Chinese historical records, cultural writings, and traditional stories describe Taiwan as a region connected to Chinese dynasties at different points in the past. From China's point of view, this long timeline forms part of the foundation for how it interprets its relationship with Taiwan today. These historical references include early migration, administrative periods, and cultural links that China considers significant when explaining its modern stance. Again, our goal here is not to judge the accuracy or value of these positions, but to help listeners understand how China frames the topic in official communication.
In modern times, China's central position is known as the One China Principle, which is the official view stated by the Chinese government. In simple English, this principle says that China sees Taiwan as part of a single Chinese whole, even though the two sides have been governed separately since the mid-20th century. China often refers to events after World War II and the political changes that followed as key moments that shaped this viewpoint. The idea is that there is one China as a historical, cultural, and political concept, and the government in Beijing represents that China in international affairs.
It is important to remember that this explanation is simply describing how China sees the situation. In global diplomacy, many countries acknowledge China's position in various ways, but they do so with different levels of formality and different diplomatic choices. This is why sometimes international news can feel complex. Governments often use very careful language designed to maintain stability, support peaceful conditions, and encourage dialogue between all sides. None of this language means that one government is being supported over another. It simply reflects the careful nature of international relations.
China also emphasizes historical migration and cultural ties in its explanation. For example, China points out that large communities from provinces such as Fujian and Guangdong migrated to Taiwan over many centuries, bringing languages, farming practices, religious traditions, and commercial networks that eventually blended with local cultures. From China's perspective, these cultural connections are evidence of long-term historical links. This view is used by China to explain why it sees Taiwan as part of a broader cultural family, not just a political territory.
However, diplomatic discussions do not focus only on culture. They also involve modern international agreements, global recognition systems, and the way governments communicate through official channels. Most countries around the world follow what is often called a One China policy, which is different from China's One China principle. The One China policy simply means that many countries acknowledge that China has a position on Taiwan. But these countries do not make their own judgments about sovereignty, and they do not take any explicit side. This careful approach allows governments to maintain economic, cultural, and unofficial relations with Taiwan while also keeping formal diplomatic ties with China.
In academic discussions, experts often explain that China's perspective is shaped by historical events from the 20th century, especially moments after World War II and the civil conflict that created two different governments on each side of the Taiwan Strait. China sees the political separation that followed as temporary and believes that the long-term historical trend connects both sides. This view informs China's official statements, its diplomatic language, and its approach to international discussions. From an educational standpoint, understanding this helps learners follow global dialogue more easily.
Another part of China's perspective involves regional stability. In many of its official documents, China states that it hopes for peaceful conditions in the region and prefers dialogue and long-term understanding. While other governments may express different viewpoints, China consistently presents its own perspective as one focused on maintaining regional order as it understands it. Again, this does not mean we are endorsing or rejecting China's view. We are simply presenting the wording and explanations that China uses in its public communication, so learners can understand international news without feeling overwhelmed by unfamiliar terms.
China also frequently explains that its historical view is connected to national identity. In Chinese culture, the idea of territorial unity has deep roots that stretch back centuries, and many traditional stories, poems, and historical accounts describe unity as a central value. Because of this cultural background, modern discussions involving Taiwan are seen by China not only through political lenses, but also through historical and emotional lenses. This cultural context helps explain why China often speaks firmly about the issue, even when delivering messages in a formal diplomatic tone.
In global diplomacy, countries respond to China's perspective in different ways. Some nations choose to maintain economic relations with both sides. Some focus primarily on trade. Some emphasize the importance of peaceful dialogue. Others avoid commenting at all, choosing instead to support stability without making political statements. These different approaches show that the international community does not treat the issue as a simple matter. Instead, governments use cautious, neutral language to avoid tension and to maintain positive economic and cultural exchange across Asia.
For English learners, understanding China's perspective is important not because you need to agree or disagree with it, but because this knowledge helps you follow news reports, documentaries, international discussions, and educational programs that mention Taiwan or East Asia. When you understand the historical logic behind China's statements, you can listen to global conversations with more confidence, interpret information in a balanced way, and avoid confusion caused by unfamiliar political vocabulary.
And this is the key idea of this section. Knowledge helps reduce misunderstanding. When we look at any country's perspective, in this case China's, we focus on understanding the reasons, the history, the cultural background, and the diplomatic structure behind that perspective. We are not choosing a side, not supporting any position, and not making any political judgment. We are simply learning, step by step, how different viewpoints were formed and why they matter in today's international relations.
Today, we move into a gentle and informative look at how Taiwan understands itself, focusing only on social, cultural, and democratic ideas, because our goal is to help learners see how people describe their community and daily life without taking any political position. And this kind of balanced explanation helps English learners explore global topics with comfort and confidence as they grow their vocabulary and listening skills in a safe way.
When people talk about Taiwan's society, they often mention its modern lifestyle because the island has developed a very active culture that blends traditional customs with new technology. And many visitors say the streets feel both energetic and friendly, which creates an atmosphere where local traditions such as night markets, festivals, and family gatherings continue, while younger generations embrace innovation, art, education, and global communication as part of everyday life.
Many international students describe Taiwan as a place where education plays a major role, since schools emphasize science, languages, and creativity. And this focus has contributed to the island's strong participation in technology and research, meaning that Taiwan's younger population grows up with not only academic goals, but also an interest in global culture, teamwork, and international conversation, which helps the island stay connected to people around the world.
Taiwan also has a democratic system that encourages public participation, and this means that people vote for leaders, express opinions through open discussions, and follow processes designed to represent society's ideas. So when we describe Taiwan's perspective, we are not promoting any political claim, but simply showing how the island organizes daily decision-making through institutions that aim to reflect the voices of its citizens which is an essential part of understanding its modern identity.
Many people in Taiwan describe their future using words like stability, safety, cooperation, and continued economic development, because citizens often talk about wanting to maintain a peaceful environment where daily life can continue without interruption. And they focus on education, innovation, healthcare, and opportunities for young people, which shows that the idea of progress in Taiwan is strongly linked to creating a calm space where families can grow and businesses can work with partners across the world.
Another important point in understanding Taiwan's perspective is recognizing how strongly culture shapes identity, because Taiwanese culture includes influences from indigenous communities, historical Chinese traditions, Japanese periods of cultural exchange, and modern global trends. And these layers mix together to create a unique sense of belonging that many people feel deeply connected to, especially through food, art, community events, and the value placed on respect, hospitality, and personal responsibility.
When people in Taiwan describe their place in the world, they often focus on practical matters such as economic cooperation, technology partnerships, and educational exchanges, and they express interest in maintaining international friendships that help students, researchers, and companies work together, which means that Taiwan's perspective includes a strong desire for peaceful global interaction that supports learning, creativity, and sustainable growth across different regions.
It is also important to mention that Taiwan's society talks a lot about protecting its environment, since the island has mountains, forests, and coastal areas that are considered valuable. And many community groups encourage recycling programs, clean energy ideas, and efforts to preserve nature. So this environmental attention becomes part of Taiwan's modern identity and helps English learners understand why sustainability is a common topic in public conversations on the island.
For many observers who study Taiwan, one of the most noticeable features is how actively people participate in community life, because local organizations, neighborhood events, and volunteer groups play a meaningful role in shaping the social environment. And this community engagement strengthens the feeling of unity by creating spaces where people help each other, celebrate shared traditions, and support educational or cultural projects that bring different generations together.
When we summarize Taiwan's perspective in a neutral and simple way, we can say that the island sees itself as a modern, culturally rich, technologically advanced, and democratic society that values peaceful development, global cooperation, community participation, and long-term stability. And this educational explanation helps English learners understand the general outlook of the island without promoting, supporting, or arguing for any political position, ensuring that the topic remains suitable for classroom and YouTube settings.
When we talk about the role of the United States in the Taiwan question, we are describing it through the lens of international law, long-term agreements, and security studies, because the United States often discusses this topic using official policies that emphasize stability, peaceful dialogue, and predictable communication. And this structured approach allows global audiences and English learners to understand how nations handle sensitive topics in a careful and rule-based manner.
The United States maintains what is often called a commitment to peaceful resolution, which means that its public statements usually encourage all sides to avoid tension, rely on diplomacy, and follow international frameworks. And this neutral explanation helps listeners see that countries use structured principles rather than emotional debates when discussing important regions, making it easier for English learners to build vocabulary related to foreign policy and cooperative problem-solving.
From an academic perspective, the United States often looks at Taiwan through economic connections, because companies from both sides work together in areas like technology, manufacturing, and research, and these partnerships continue because global supply chains depend on predictable relationships, which means many governments, not just the United States, pay attention to the island's stability in order to support trade, investment, and innovation in a peaceful and consistent environment.
In security studies, Analysts sometimes explain that the United States pays attention to the Taiwan Strait because major international shipping routes pass through the region, and these routes carry goods, energy supplies, and essential materials used by countries all over the world. So the interest is not only political, but also economic and logistical. And this type of explanation helps our listeners understand why stable transportation and safe sea lanes matter for global commerce and daily life.
It is also important to mention that the United States follows official documents that outline how it interacts with Taiwan, and these documents use careful wording to promote balance, stability, and communication across the region, because governments often rely on written guidelines to prevent misunderstandings and to support peaceful management of complex issues, which shows English learners how policies are shaped by rules, agreements, and the goal of reducing unnecessary tension.
Many countries outside the United States, such as nations in Europe or Asia, also describe their approach to Taiwan using neutral and cooperative language, because they emphasize the importance of dialogue, economic partnership, and peaceful development. And this global perspective teaches English learners that international relations is not only about individual governments, but also about shared principles like respect, stability, and constructive engagement across borders.
When scholars analyze the role of the United States, they often highlight how American universities, research centers, and businesses maintain connections with Taiwan to support education, science, and technology, and these connections encourage students, scientists, and entrepreneurs to exchange ideas in a calm environment that focuses on learning and cooperation, which demonstrates how international engagement can support progress without entering political debates or sensitive policy areas.
Another important point is that many governments publicly express support for peaceful decision-making in the Taiwan Strait because sudden changes or unpredictable events could affect trade, travel, and economic growth. And therefore, countries emphasize stability not to take sides, but to help ensure that people, markets, and institutions around the world can continue their activities in a safe and organized environment, which reflects the practical reasoning behind many diplomatic statements.
In educational discussions, experts also explain that the United States studies the region through alliances, agreements, and long-term partnerships, but these relationships are usually framed around cooperation, communication, and shared interests rather than confrontation. And this helps English learners understand that international alliances often focus on peace, collective security, disaster response, and humanitarian coordination rather than political arguments or competing narratives.
When we summarize the US role and broader international involvement in a neutral way, we can say that many countries observe the Taiwan situation through the lenses of international law, economic cooperation, maritime security, and diplomatic communication. And they often express encouragement for stability and peaceful solutions, which creates a framework that is safe, balanced, and educational for our English learners who want to understand global relations in a simple and respectful manner.
Taiwan is not only important for politics and diplomacy, but also plays a key role in the global economy, because the island produces advanced technology, hosts major manufacturing facilities, and is located near some of the busiest shipping routes in the world. And any potential disruption in this region could affect trade flows, transportation schedules, and business planning for companies in Asia, Europe, North America, and other regions that rely on products and resources passing through these channels.
One major factor is global supply chains, which are networks of factories, suppliers, warehouses, and shipping lines that work together to deliver goods to consumers. And Taiwan is central to many of these chains because it produces high-tech components such as semiconductors, circuit boards, and other electronic parts that are needed by manufacturers of smartphones, computers, cars, medical devices, and industrial machinery across the world.
Shipping lanes near Taiwan carry enormous amounts of cargo every year, and analysts often highlight that any delay, blockage, or instability in the Taiwan Strait could increase shipping costs, slow down deliveries, and create shortages of products that people rely on every day, from electronic devices to raw materials, showing that the location of the island is not only strategically important, but also economically vital for keeping global trade flowing smoothly and predictably.
Technology production is particularly sensitive because many high-tech industries rely on Taiwanese semiconductors, and these tiny chips are used in everything from consumer electronics to industrial machinery, and even short-term interruptions in production or shipment can ripple across international markets, causing delays in product releases, increased costs for manufacturers, and fluctuations in global stock markets, which demonstrates the economic reach of the island far beyond its physical size.
Energy supply is another aspect that could be affected, because countries in East Asia import fuel, natural gas, and other energy resources that often pass through nearby waters. And if tensions around Taiwan were to affect maritime navigation, energy shipments could become slower or more expensive, which would impact industries, electricity production, and transportation in multiple countries, highlighting how connected the global economy is to regional stability in Asia.
Financial markets also respond to the perception of risk, and economists often note that investors closely monitor news related to Taiwan because uncertainty can cause stock prices, currency values, and commodity prices to fluctuate, which affects companies and consumers worldwide. And this is why governments, banks, and multinational corporations pay close attention to developments in the region and incorporate risk assessments into their planning.
Manufacturing in countries that rely on imported components from Taiwan could experience delays if production slows or shipments are disrupted, because even a temporary interruption in the supply of critical technology components can delay the assembly of electronics, vehicles, and industrial equipment, demonstrating that global manufacturing is deeply interconnected, and that Taiwan's role in the high-tech supply chain is essential to the smooth operation of factories far beyond the island itself.
Trade agreements between countries also emphasize stability and predictable logistics, because predictable routes, reliable ports, and consistent production are necessary for contracts, international commerce, and investment planning, and any uncertainty in the region could create delays in meeting delivery deadlines, increase shipping insurance costs, and encourage companies to seek alternative routes or suppliers, which can increase overall expenses for businesses and consumers.
Even service industries are affected, because logistics companies, insurance firms, shipping agencies, and import-export businesses depend on smooth global flows to operate efficiently. And if shipments through the Taiwan Strait or nearby ports are disrupted, these industries may face operational difficulties, increased costs, and delayed services, which shows that economic consequences are not limited to manufacturing alone, but extend to every sector connected to trade and commerce.
In summary, Taiwan's economic importance is linked to global markets, shipping lanes, technology production, energy supply, and overall international stability. And by understanding these economic impacts, English learners can see how one region can influence daily life, business operations, and market conditions worldwide without focusing on politics. And this knowledge helps learners connect vocabulary related to trade, supply chains, global economics, and risk management to real-world applications in an educational, safe, and neutral way.
Taiwan is often called one of the most sensitive or high-profile issues in Asia, and to understand why, it helps to look at several interconnected factors in a calm, educational way, because history, geography, technology, trade, and diplomacy all combine to create a situation that draws attention from governments, businesses, and international organizations around the world. And understanding this complexity can help English learners follow news stories and global discussions with confidence and clarity.
First, geography plays a central role in Taiwan's importance because the island is located in the Western Pacific Ocean near major countries such as China, Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. And its position sits along some of the world's busiest sea routes that carry trade goods, energy supplies, and raw materials. which means that even minor disruptions in this region can influence shipping costs, global supply chains, and economic stability for multiple nations across Asia and beyond, which highlights why its location is closely watched.
Second, history shapes the region's sensitivity, because Taiwan has been influenced by indigenous cultures, Chinese migration, Japanese rule, and post-World War II developments, creating layers of cultural, social, and historical connections that are still discussed today. And these historical elements help explain why multiple governments approach Taiwan cautiously, emphasizing diplomacy, careful language, and peaceful dialogue, while recognizing the island's role in regional stability, all without taking a position or making value judgments.
Third, Taiwan's modern economy and technological significance make it critical to global markets, because the island produces a large portion of the world's advanced semiconductors and electronic components, and these products are essential for smartphones, computers, vehicles, medical equipment, and industrial machinery, which means that any potential disruption in production or shipment could have ripple effects across global supply chains, affecting manufacturing, shipping, pricing, and investment decisions for countries around the world.
Fourth, military presence in the region adds another layer of attention, because multiple countries monitor naval exercises, airspace activity, and defense systems near Taiwan, not to support or oppose any party, but to maintain awareness of regional security, prepare for possible emergencies, and ensure that international shipping, trade, and energy transport can continue safely, which demonstrates how strategic planning, security studies, and risk assessment are applied to real-world situations in Asia.
Fifth, diplomacy plays a major role in how Taiwan is perceived globally, because countries such as the United States, Japan, European nations, and regional partners use careful communication, agreements, and formal guidelines to encourage stability and dialogue without taking sides. And this structured approach shows English learners how governments engage with complex issues by following international law, protecting trade and commerce, and using clear, cautious language to avoid misunderstanding or tension.
Another factor is global interdependence, because Taiwan is connected to international trade, financial markets, technology networks, and educational exchanges, and even small changes or uncertainty in the region can influence stock prices, currency exchange rates, shipping schedules, and manufacturing timelines, demonstrating that the island's importance extends beyond local borders and impacts daily life, businesses, and economic planning around the world in ways that learners can relate to when studying global economics.
Historical conflicts, modern development, and geographic significance combine with economic importance and diplomacy to create what experts describe as a complex regional issue, because it involves multiple dimensions simultaneously: territorial history, cultural identity, technological leadership, strategic location, and international relations. And understanding these layers helps learners see why Taiwan is frequently discussed in news reports, educational programs, and research studies without requiring them to form a political opinion or take a side.
For English learners, it is helpful to think of Taiwan as a case study in how geography, history, trade, and diplomacy intersect in global affairs, because every news headline, academic paper, or documentary often refers to one or more of these aspects, and by learning related vocabulary, sentence structures, and explanations, students can understand complex ideas in a neutral, factual way, which supports listening, reading, speaking, and comprehension skills at beginner to intermediate levels.
Additionally, the concept of global stability is closely linked to Taiwan's significance, because countries monitor developments in the region to ensure that trade routes, energy supplies, shipping, and international communication networks remain predictable. And governments often plan exercises, risk assessments, and cooperative strategies to minimize potential disruption, showing English learners how education, planning, and careful observation contribute to safe and orderly international operations without political bias.
Military modernization, technological leadership, and economic integration also interact to make Taiwan a focal point, because analysts study the region to understand how different nations' capabilities, trade dependencies, and diplomatic strategies combine, not to judge or take sides, but to provide insight into patterns of international cooperation, logistics, and resource planning, which are crucial skills for understanding global business, technology sectors, and economic forecasting, all topics relevant to learners interested in world affairs.
Taiwan's social and democratic systems, educational focus, and cultural identity add further context, because international observers take note of how the population organizes society, builds institutions, and participates in education and innovation, which in turn influences how other countries engage economically, diplomatically, and socially. And this understanding allows learners to recognize the human dimension behind headlines, statistics, and supply chains, highlighting that real people and communities are always at the center of global developments.
In short, what makes Taiwan the most discussed or explosive topic in Asia is the combination of multiple neutral factors: its geography, which affects trade and transportation; its history, which shapes regional awareness; its economy and technology, which influence global supply chains; its military and strategic relevance, which inform security planning; and diplomacy, which governs international communication and agreements. And by looking at these factors together, learners can see how complex international issues are analyzed calmly and educationally.
Understanding Taiwan in this neutral way also helps learners see why it matters. It provides a clear example of how geography, history, economics, and diplomacy are interconnected, and how countries, businesses, and societies respond to global challenges without taking extreme positions, which supports English learners in following news reports, participating in classroom discussions, and practicing language skills while discussing important international topics in a safe and balanced manner that encourages knowledge rather than opinion.
By breaking the issue into these educational components, learners can also practice English vocabulary related to trade, security, diplomacy, geography, history, and technology, while building listening and comprehension skills, because following long explanations in context helps students recognize repeated patterns, connect cause and effect, and understand why certain regions, like Taiwan, appear frequently in international conversations without introducing political bias. And this method makes complex topics more accessible for beginners and intermediate learners alike.
Finally, looking at Taiwan from a neutral educational perspective demonstrates that even a small island can have global importance, because its location, resources, industries, and history all intersect with international concerns, trade networks, and security frameworks. And by learning about these connections, English learners gain the tools to understand news, academic discussions, and professional dialogue, showing that knowledge, context, and careful explanation are the keys to following complex international topics safely and effectively.
As we reach the final part of our podcast today, it is helpful to look back calmly at the main educational points we have discussed, because understanding Taiwan's situation involves multiple dimensions that are connected, and by reviewing history, geography, economy, technology, diplomacy, and international involvement in a neutral and factual way, English learners can better follow global news, develop vocabulary, and practice listening comprehension, which are all essential skills for language growth.
Throughout this series, we explored Taiwan's geographic position, showing how its location near major countries and busy trade routes makes it strategically important for shipping, international trade, and regional awareness. And learners can notice that geography is not just about maps, but also about understanding why certain places attract attention in global economics, diplomacy, and security, which helps connect words and concepts to real-life examples that are relevant in English language discussions.
We also examined Taiwan's historical background, describing indigenous cultures, Chinese migration, Japanese influence, and post-World War II developments. And this historical context helps listeners understand how past events shape modern societies, and it also introduces vocabulary about culture, migration, governance, and historical timelines, which is useful for learners who want to read articles, watch documentaries, or participate in classroom conversations about international topics in English.
In discussing Taiwan's modern economy, we highlighted the global importance of semiconductors, electronics, trade, and technology. And this shows how specialized vocabulary, like supply chains, manufacturing, components, and global markets, can be learned through real-world examples, giving learners practical ways to expand English skills while connecting language to global issues, which makes the learning process meaningful, memorable, and engaging for anyone practicing English.
We also presented China's perspective in a neutral academic tone, showing how governments describe relationships based on history, culture, and official statements, and by learning words like principle, framework, diplomacy, and policy, learners can see how political discussions use specific language to convey meaning carefully, and this helps students follow international news, academic texts, and educational programs without needing advanced prior knowledge or forming opinions about politics.
Similarly, we explained Taiwan's own perspective in neutral terms, focusing on democracy, culture, education, society, and future development, which allows learners to understand language related to governance, social participation, innovation, and planning. And this shows how descriptive English can be used to explain ideas clearly and factually, helping students practice comprehension while building vocabulary related to social studies, culture, and modern life.
The section on the United States and other international involvement illustrated how countries approach complex issues through law, economics, and diplomacy, and by observing phrases like peaceful resolution, stability, dialogue, and cooperation, learners can see examples of formal English used in international communication, which is useful for understanding educational videos, news broadcasts, academic lectures, and professional discussions in English, all without engaging in political debate or taking sides.
We also discussed the economic impacts of tension around Taiwan, focusing on supply chains, shipping routes, technology production, energy transportation, and global markets. And this provides vocabulary such as logistics, commodity, forecasting, and global stability, while demonstrating cause and effect relationships in English, helping learners practice connecting ideas in longer sentences, understanding complex concepts, and summarizing information in a clear and neutral manner suitable for classroom or online study.
In our last long section, we summarized why Taiwan is considered the most sensitive issue in Asia, combining all the factors: geography, history, economy, technology, military observation, and diplomacy, into a single neutral explanation, and this integrative approach encourages learners to see connections between ideas, understand structured reasoning in English, and build skills in both listening and critical thinking, without requiring any personal opinion or political judgment.
For today's small comprehension activity, listeners can pause and write a few sentences, summarizing 1 or 2 points from the podcast in simple English, such as explaining why Taiwan's geography is important, how its economy affects global supply chains, or what vocabulary terms were new. And this exercise helps learners practice writing, reinforce memory, and use new words in context, which is one of the most effective ways to improve language skills for beginners and intermediate students alike.
As a final reflection, we encourage learners to think about how global issues can be studied in a neutral, educational way by focusing on facts, historical timelines, economic connections, and diplomatic language, because this approach helps English learners understand real-world topics without confusion, and it shows that even complex subjects can be explained clearly, logically, and safely for educational purposes while strengthening comprehension, vocabulary, and critical thinking skills.
Remember, learning English is not only about words and grammar. It is also about understanding ideas, following reasoning, and connecting language to meaningful topics. And by listening carefully, practicing new vocabulary, summarizing concepts, and reflecting on the material, learners can steadily improve their skills, become more confident in understanding international discussions, and enjoy the process of learning in a way that is engaging, educational, and inspiring.
So, dear listeners, as we end this episode, keep in mind that global topics like Taiwan can be understood in a calm and structured way, focusing on geography, history, economy, technology, and diplomacy, and by practicing English through listening, reflection, and writing exercises, you are not only improving your language skills, but also gaining knowledge that helps you navigate global conversations confidently, which is the ultimate goal of our educational podcast series.
Finally, always remember to like the video if you found it helpful. Subscribe to the English Globe to continue your learning journey, and share your thoughts in the comments, telling us where you are listening from and what you learned today. Because practicing reflection, using new words, and connecting with a community of learners is a powerful way to stay motivated, improve steadily, and enjoy the process of learning English while exploring interesting and meaningful topics from around the world.